The snow was falling steadily outside my Chicago apartment window when the text arrived. 3 months of silence, then suddenly Mom's familiar number lighting up my phone screen. Christmas dinner at the house. 6 p.m. Please come, Michael. We need to talk. I stared at those words for what felt like an eternity, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The same house where I'd grown up, where I'd scraped my knee learning to ride a bike, where I'd graduated high school with dreams bigger than our small suburban neighborhood. It's the same house I hadn't set foot in since Dad's funeral 8 months ago. My reflection in the window showed a man I barely recognized anymore. 34 years old, stubble covering a face that had lost too much weight, eyes that carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. The promotion at the marketing firm had come with a price: 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and relationships that withered like plants forgotten in dark corners. The argument with my brother, David, at the funeral still echoed in my mind, his voice sharp with grief and accusation. Where were you when Dad was asking for you? Too busy with your important job to visit a dying man? The words had cut deeper than any physical wound, mainly because they carried the sting of truth. My phone buzzed again. The whole family will be there. Sarah's bringing the kids. David's making his famous stuffing. You're not complete without you. Sarah, my younger sister, had always been the peacemaker. At 29, she'd managed to build the life we'd all dreamed of. Married to a good man, 2 beautiful children, a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. She'd tried to bridge the gap between David and me, but some wounds run too deep for even the best intentions. The decision surprised me. Maybe it was the loneliness, or maybe it was the realization that I'd been running from my family for so long that I'd forgotten what I was running toward. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The drive to Oak Park took 45 minutes through holiday traffic. Every mile felt like traveling backward through time, past the city's steel and glass towers, through suburbia's chain stores and strip malls, finally arriving at the tree-lined street where nothing had changed since I was a kid. I sat in the car for 10 minutes. Engine running, heat blasting, watching the warm glow spill from the windows. Through the sheer curtains, I could see figures, moving around, setting the table, hanging stockings. A normal family, preparing for a normal Christmas. The door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there, smaller than I remembered. Her gray hair pulled back in the same practical bun she'd worn my entire childhood. Her eyes, the same deep brown as mine, filled with tears as she pulled me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. I wasn't sure you'd come, she whispered against my shoulder. Neither was I admitted. The house felt both familiar and strange, like visiting a museum of my own life. The same family photos lined the hallway, but they seemed frozen in time, stopping abruptly around the period when I'd gotten too busy to come home regularly. Uncle Mike. The voice belonged to Emma, Sarah's 6-year-old daughter, who launched herself at my legs with the fearless enthusiasm only children possess. Behind her, 3-year-old Jake followed, shy but curious. Look how big you've gotten, I said, lifting Emma into a hug. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been learning too. Walk. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Michael, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I'm glad you came. We embraced, and I felt the slight stiffness in her shoulders, the way she held back just a little. Even Sarah, my most forgiving sibling, carried some resentment about my absence. The kitchen had always been the heart of our house, and walking into it felt like stepping into a memory. The same worn linoleum, the same mismatched chairs around the table Dad had built in his workshop. The smell of turkey and stuffing filled the air. Tom, Sarah's husband, stood by the counter opening a bottle of wine. He greeted me with the careful courtesy of someone who'd heard stories but was reserving judgment, and there was David, my older brother by 3 years. David had inherited Dad's broad shoulders and Mom's fierce protectiveness of family. He'd stayed in Oak Park, taken over Dad's plumbing business, married his high school sweetheart, and built a life that was everything I'd thought I was too good for. He stood at the stove, stirring gravy, his back to me. David, I said, the name. Feeling strange after months of silence, he turned, his face a mask of polite indifference. Michael. Mom said you might show up. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Tom suddenly became very interested in his wine bottle, and Sarah started fussing with napkins that were already perfectly arranged. "I brought wine," I said, holding up the expensive bottle I'd grabbed from my apartment. "I wouldn't know," David said, turning back to the stove. "It's been a while since we've had wine together." For the next hour, we moved through the familiar dance of family dinner preparation. I set places for 7, including the high chair for Jake. Sarah arranged the food while Mom fussed over details. Tom kept the wine flowing and tried to lighten the mood with stories about his insurance job, but underneath it all, could feel the tension building like a storm system. David's silence was pointed, his movements sharp with barely contained emotion. Every interaction felt like walking through a minefield. When we finally sat down to eat, the table looked exactly like every Christmas dinner of my childhood, turkey golden and perfect. Stuffing spilling from the bird, green bean casserole topped with crispy onions, mashed potatoes whipped to creamy perfection. "Should we say grace?" Mom asked. It was Dad who'd always said grace, his deep voice thanking God for family, health, and the food before us.
Ow.
His empty chair at the head of the table seemed to loom larger than any of us. "I'll do it," David said. We joined hands, and I felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "Thank you for bringing us together," David said, his eyes closed. "For family, for this food, for second chances." Dinner started peacefully enough, Emma chattered. About her school Christmas play, where she'd been cast as an angel. Jake insisted on feeding himself, which meant more food ended up on his shirt than in his mouth. Tom and Sarah tag-teamed the parenting duties with easy efficiency. I found myself relaxing for the first time in months. The wine helped, but more than that, I was remembering what it felt like to be part of something bigger than myself. The familiar rhythms of family conversation, the way Mom's face lit up when she talked about her grandchildren. "So, Michael," Tom said, cutting into his turkey, "Sarah tells me you got a promotion, Senior Director of Strategic Marketing, right?" I nodded, trying to find the enthusiasm I'd felt when I first got the news. "It's a good opportunity. We're expanding into international markets, working with some major brands." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said, beaming with pride. "Your father would be so proud." The mention of Dad created a moment of silence, but it felt reverent, rather. Then awkward. I was about to respond when David spoke up. "Must be nice to have a job that matters," he said, his voice deceptively casual. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly what it meant. "Nothing," David said, not looking up from his plate. "Just making conversation." But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he spoke. Sarah shot him a warning look, but David was past caring about keeping the peace. "Actually," he continued, setting down his fork, "I'm curious about something. All these important clients, all these crucial meetings, did any of them prevent you from visiting Dad while he was dying?" The question hung in the air, like smoke. From a fire? Mom's face went pale, and Sarah reached across the table to touch David's arm. "David, please no. It's a legitimate question," David said, his voice rising. "I mean, we're all here celebrating Michael's success, right? So I'm wondering if any of those strategic marketing initiatives were more important than spending time with your father." I felt heat rising in my chest, the familiar burn of anger mixed with guilt. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" David turned to face me fully now, his eyes blazing with 8 months of pent-up grief and resentment. "I was here, Michael. I was here when Dad couldn't sleep because the pain was so bad. I was here when he asked why you never called. I was here when he died asking for you." "David, stop," Mom said, her voice shaking. "He was my father too," I said, my voice barely controlled. "You think I don't know what I lost? You think I don't regret? Regret?" David laughed bitterly. "You regret it? You know what Dad said too?" "Me, the day before he died," said. "I guess Michael's too important for us now. A dying man, wondering why his son couldn't be bothered to visit." The words hit me like physical blows. I'd known deep down that my absence had hurt Dad, but hearing it spoken aloud, seeing the pain in David's eyes, made it real in a way that my private guilt never had. "I was building a career," I said weakly. Was trying to what? David stood up now, his chair scraping against the floor. Escape. Because that's what you've been doing your whole life, isn't it? Running away from anything. That doesn't fit your perfect image of yourself. That's not fair, I protested. But even as I said it, I knew he was right. Isn't it? David's voice was getting louder now, and I could see Emma and Jake shrinking in their chairs, confused and frightened. You think you're better than us, don't you? Better than this house? Better than Dad's business? Better than the life that was good enough for the rest of us? I never said that, I said, standing up to match his posture. You didn't have to say it, David shot back. You showed it. Every missed dinner, every excuse, every time you chose work over family. And now you waltz in here like nothing happened, like you can just pick up where you left off. Boys, please, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. Please don't do this. Not today. But David was past listening. Months of grief and anger had built up like pressure in a volcano, and now it was erupting. He looked at me with a mixture of hurt and disgust that made my stomach churn. You want to know what I really think? He said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. I think you showing up here today is just another performance, another way to make yourself feel better about the fact that you abandoned your family when we needed you most. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Sarah quietly crying. Emma had climbed into her mother's lap, and Jake was sucking his thumb. A habit he'd outgrown months ago. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss. All the success, all the achievements, all the carefully constructed image of the man I'd thought I wanted to be. None of it mattered in the face of this fundamental truth. I had failed the people who mattered most. So answer me this, David, continued, his voice carrying the weight of every missed birthday, every unanswered phone call, every moment of my absence. Why did you even come? The question hung in the air like a judgment. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for an answer I wasn't sure I had. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in a blanket of white. But inside this room, there was only the mess I'd made of my relationships. The damage I'd done through years of choosing everything else over the people who'd loved me unconditionally. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. What could I say? That I'd come because I was lonely. That I'd finally realized what I'd lost. That I was sorry. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of Jake's quiet whimpering and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. David stood there, waiting, his chest rising and falling with the force of his emotions. And I stood there, 34 years old, successful by every measure that mattered to the world, and realized I had no idea how to answer the simplest question. Of all, why had I come? The silence that followed David's question felt like a living thing, pressing down on all of us with the weight of years of unspoken hurt. I could hear the old house settling around us, the furnace clicking on, the distant sound of neighbors. Children playing in the snow? Emma's small voice broke the spell. Why is everyone sad? She asked, looking up at Sarah with the bewildered expression of a child who'd walked into an adult world she couldn't understand. Nothing, sweetheart, Sarah said, her voice thick with tears. Uncle David and Uncle Mike are just ... talking. Are they mad at each other? Jake asked, his 3-year-old directness cutting through the pretense. Sometimes adults get upset when they miss someone they love, Mom said gently. Like we all miss Grandpa. The mention of Dad seemed to deflate David's anger, replacing it with something deeper and more painful. He sank back into his chair, his face buried in his hands. I'm sorry, he said, his voice muffled. I'm sorry, kids. I didn't mean to yell. It's okay, Uncle David, Emma said with the easy forgiveness of childhood. Mommy says sometimes people have big feelings that are too big for their bodies. I watched this exchange feeling like an outsider looking in, seeing the easy intimacy between David and Sarah's children, the way they turned to him for comfort. He was Uncle David who fixed their toys and taught them to ride bikes. I was Uncle Mike who sent expensive gifts but couldn't be bothered to visit. Maybe we should clear the table, Tom suggested, standing up and beginning to gather plates. I'll help, I said, grateful for the excuse to move. As we worked together in the kitchen, the familiar rhythm of cleaning up after a meal provided a temporary reprieve from the tension. Sarah got the kids settled in the living room with a Christmas movie. I should go, I said quietly to Mom as she wrapped leftovers. No, she said firmly. You came here for a reason, Michael. Don't leave before you figure out what it is. David was loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision. We worked around each other in the small kitchen, a dance of avoidance that felt both familiar and heartbreaking. I tried to call, I said. Suddenly, after the funeral, tried to call, but I didn't know what to say. David's hand stilled on the dish he was holding. What was there to say? That I was sorry. That I was wrong. That I was scared. Scared of what? David turned to. Face me. Of not being good enough? I said, the admission feeling like pulling a splinter from my soul. Of being ordinary. Of ending up like ... double quotes like Dad. David's voice was quiet, but I could hear the edge in it. No, I said quickly, then stopped. Maybe. I don't know. I thought I needed to be something more than what I came from. Dad was a good man, David said. I know that. I've always known that. But I wanted something different. I wanted to matter in a way that felt bigger than our neighborhood, bigger than Oak Park. David leaned against the counter, studying me. And do you matter? The question hit me like a physical blow. I thought about my corner office, my business cards, the awards on my wall. I thought about the clients who called me by my first name but wouldn't recognize me on the street. I thought about the apartment I came home to every night, silent and empty. I don't know, I said, and the honesty of it surprised me. I thought I did. I thought success meant something. But when Dad died, when I realized I'd missed my chance to say goodbye, ... You could have come earlier, David said. He was sick for months. We all knew he was dying. I know, I said. I kept thinking I had time. I kept thinking I'd visit next weekend, or next month, or after this project was finished. I kept thinking there would be a better time. There's never a better time, David said. There's just time, and then there isn't. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of that truth settling between us. I miss him, I said, the words barely above a whisper. Yeah, David said. Me too. Sarah appeared in the doorway. The kids are asking for Uncle Mike, she said. They want you to read them a story. I looked at David, uncertain. I should probably go. No, he said, and there was something different in his voice now. They're your family too. Go read them a story. The living room felt warm and safe after the emotional storm of the kitchen. Emma and Jake had built a fort out of couch cushions and were snuggled inside with a pile of picture books. They looked up at me with the expectant faces of children, who believed adults could make everything better with the right story. Which book do you want to read? I asked, settling onto the floor beside their fort. This one, Emma said, holding up a worn copy of the Polar Express. It's about believing in things you can't see. I opened the book and began to read, my voice finding the rhythm of a story I'd heard countless times as a child. As I read about the boy who heard the bell, I found myself remembering Christmas mornings in this same room. David and Sarah and me fighting over who got to open presents first. Mom and Dad watching from the doorway with coffee cups in there. Hands. Do you believe in Santa? Jake asked, interrupting my reading. Hey, I believe in magic, I said, surprising myself with the answer. Maybe not the kind with flying reindeer, but the kind that happens when families come together. Mommy says families are like puzzles, Emma said seriously. Sometimes the pieces get lost, but they're still part of the picture. I glanced toward the kitchen, where I could hear the low murmur of adult conversation. Your mommy's very smart, I said. Are you a lost piece? Jake asked with the devastating directness of a 3-year-old. Before I could answer, David appeared in the doorway. Kids, it's time for bed. You can finish the story tomorrow. But Uncle Mike just started, Emma protested. Uncle Mike will still be here tomorrow, David said. And I felt something shift in my chest at his words. Won't you? If you'll have me, I said, looking up at him. We'll see, he said. But there was something softer in his voice now, as Sarah got the kids ready for bed. I found myself alone in the living room with Mom. She was sitting in Dad's old chair, staring at the Christmas tree with its mixture of expensive ornaments and handmade decorations from our childhood. I kept your ornaments, she said without looking at me. Every year I hang them up, hoping you'll come see them. I walked over to the tree and found them Celia construction paper angel I'd made in 2nd grade. A popsicle stick star covered in glitter, a clay Santa that looked more like a potato than a person. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said. "I'm sorry I stayed away. I'm sorry I missed so much." "I know you are," she said. "But sorry doesn't give me back the years you were gone." It's the words. Stung, but I knew they were true. I'd been so focused on building a future that I'd forgotten to live in the present. "I don't know how to fix this," I said. "You can't fix it," Mom said, "but you can do better going forward if you want to." "I want to," I said, and I meant it. I want to be here. I want to be part of this family again. "Then you have to show up," she said simply. "Not just for Christmas, not just for the big moments. You have to show up for the ordinary days too." David and Sarah came back downstairs. The kids finally settled. We stood around the living room. Awkwardly for adults who'd said too much and not enough, all at the same time. "It's snowing pretty hard," Tom observed. "Maybe we should stay the night." "Good idea," Mom said quickly. "Michael, you can take your old room. I can drive home," I said. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," David said. "You're a family. That's what family does. We take care of each other." The word family hung between us, carrying the weight of everything we'd lost and everything we might still salvage. "Okay," I said. "I'll stay." I woke up Christmas morning in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the ghosts of my younger self. The walls still held posters of bands I'd forgotten I liked. Ribbons from high school track meets. A photograph of me and David and Sarah at the lake one summer. The smell of coffee and bacon drew me downstairs, where I found Mom in the kitchen, still in her robe, starting breakfast. She looked up when I entered, and I saw the wariness in her eyes. "Good morning," I said, kissing her cheek. "Can I help?" "You can set the table," she said, handing me a stack of plates. The kitchen felt different in the morning light, less charged with emotion, more like the comfortable space where I'd eaten thousands of meals as a child. David appeared in the doorway, already dressed. "Morning," he said, the word carrying a tentative peace offering. "Morning," I replied, accepting it. We worked together in companionable silence, the easy rhythm of people who'd shared a kitchen for years. David made coffee while I set the table, and Mom hummed softly as she cooked. "I've been thinking," I said as we sat down to eat, "about what you asked me last night. Why I came." David looked up from his eggs, waiting. "I came because I was lonely," I said. "Because I realized that success doesn't mean much if you don't have anyone to share it with. Because I missed you. All of you. You could have called," David said. "I could have," I agreed. "But I was ashamed. I was afraid you'd tell me it was too late, that I'd burned too many bridges." "It's not too late," Mom said quietly. "It's never too late for family." "But things have to change," David said. "I can't watch you disappear again. I can't watch Mom wait by the phone for calls that don't come." "I know," I said. "I want things to change. I want to be here." After breakfast, we moved to the living room to exchange gifts. I brought expensive presents: a cashmere scarf for Mom, a high-end tool set for David, designer toys for Emma and Jake. But the gifts I received were different. Mom had knitted me a sweater, blue this time, with a pattern that reminded me of the lake house where we'd spent summers. David had framed a photograph of Dad and me from my college graduation. "I found it in his things," David said as I studied the photo. "Hey." He kept it on his desk at work. I traced the outline of Dad's face with my finger, remembering that day. He'd been so proud, telling anyone who would listen that his son was going to make something of himself. "He was proud of you," Mom said, watching me look at the photo. "Even when you were gone, he was proud." "I wish I'd told him," I said. "I wish I'd told him that I loved him." "He knew," David said. "He knew." Sarah and Tom returned from church with the kids, their cheeks pink from the cold, their voices bright with excitement. Emma and Jake tore through their presents with joyful abandon, and for a while, we were just a family watching kids be kids. Later, as we sat around the table for Christmas dinner, I found myself really looking at these people, really seeing them. David's calloused hands from years of honest work, Sarah's patient smile as she helped Jake with his food, Mom's quiet satisfaction as she watched her family together. I want to make a toast, I said, raising my glass of wine. To what? Sarah asked. 2 second chances, I said. 2 family. 2 showing up. 2 showing up, David repeated, and we all clinked glasses as the evening wound down. I found myself on the front porch with David, both of us bundled in coats, watching the snow fall. I've been thinking about expanding the business, David said suddenly. Taking on some commercial accounts in the city. I could use a partner. Someone who understands marketing, client relations. I looked at him, surprised. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to come home, he said. If you want it. The idea should have terrified me. Going from a corner office to a plumbing business. But instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about the possibility of doing work that mattered. I'd have to think about it, I said. Think about it, David said. But don't think too long. Life's short and we've already wasted too much time. That night, as I lay in my childhood bed, I thought about the story Emma had wanted me to read. The boy who heard the bell that adults couldn't hear. Maybe that's what I'd lost over the years, the ability to hear the things that mattered. I thought about my apartment in the city, my expensive suits, my business cards. Then I thought about Emma's laugh, Jake's sticky fingers. The way David's face had softened when he'd offered me a partnership. I thought about Mom's sweater, knitted with love and hope. In the morning, I would have to make a choice. I could go back to my old life, promising to visit more often, to call more frequently, or I could take David's offer and build something. New, the snow continued to fall outside my window, covering the world in possibility. And for the first time in years, I fell asleep not thinking about tomorrow's meetings, but about the sound of my family's laughter and the warmth of belonging somewhere that mattered. The answer to David's question why I had come was becoming clearer. I'd come home not because I was successful, but because I was lost. Not because I had something to offer, but because I needed something I'd forgotten I was missing. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to build something real.